Hello, everyone, and welcome to Folks. I'm Sonia Massengale. Did you know that suicide rates have tripled for minorities since 1960? That every year, nearly 2,000 black youths die or are severely disabled by accidents caused largely by alcohol and drug use? Psychologists and sociologists are calling this interrelationship between self-destructive and life-threatening behaviors the new morbidity, and they're finding it cropping up in increasing numbers in the minority groups of America. You said in your address that among black youth, suicide and homicide are opposite sides of the same coin. Would you elaborate on that a little bit?
As you know, homicide is in fact the leading cause of death for blacks between the ages of 15 and 34. And it is much higher than it is among white youth. And I think the reason for that is that black youth who feel very angry and feel isolated from the mainstream very often displace this anger on other blacks, because most of the homicide in the black community is committed by blacks against other blacks. So I feel that part of this anger and rage is directed inappropriately, really, toward each other because of the high rates of unemployment and the high rates of poverty and the high rates of family disorganization that these youth experience.
Justin is my youngest brother. We started to notice some signs of what we didn't know was a mental illness then, but we now know he was showing signs of living with schizophrenia. Unfortunately, Justin didn't get the support and help that he needed early, and it manifested into a schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. That's what he was diagnosed with at the age of 23, and the two together are considered schizoaffective disorder. Shortly after his diagnosis, my brother Justin completed suicide within 5 months of receiving a diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder.
This is so intricate.
Trey Lee says for years he struggled with depression.
I would have this impulse to get that knife, and I would be like so tempted to just put it right through me and end it all.
At 13, he attempted suicide.
I just noticed my arm was bleeding. I noticed I had a knife in my hand, and I didn't know what in the world I was doing.
Trey's battle is a reality for far too many children, especially blacks. A recent study shows suicide rates for black children aged 5 to 12 were 2 times higher than white kids of the same age. Kathy Williams has made it her mission to help.
I will not stop, and especially in the black community, because we don't think it happens to us.
And that pain is just as powerful today as it was in 19.
That's Torian.
Her only child, Torian, was an all-American kid, an honor student who played the saxophone in the church band and loved basketball.
He was 15.
He was clowning around on his bicycle the day before she found him dead at home from a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
People knew Bryce Gowdy as a football standout, a 5-star recruit on his way to play at Georgia Tech. What most did not know was the tremendous pressure he was under trying to take care of his family. He died just days before he was coming to start college classes here in Atlanta, and we now know that he took his own life. His family lives in Florida. There are a number of reports detailing the findings of the Broward County Medical Examiner's Office. The county sheriff's office says Bryce, who was 17, was hit by a freight train Monday afternoon. He died at the hospital. In a phone interview, his uncle, Thomas Gowdy, told NBC News his nephew was under incredible pressure. He says Bryce was the head of the household and had been taking care of his mother and his siblings. The Sun-Sentinel reported the family was homeless and they were living in a motel. Gowdy finished his high school coursework early. He was scheduled to start classes at Georgia Tech next Monday. He'd signed to play wide receiver for the team.
Historically, black people have had relatively low suicide rates, but recent studies document a troubling increase in suicides among young black people, especially black girls. According to one study between 2013 and 2019, the suicide rate among black males aged 15 to 24 spiked by 47% and 59% among black girls. The same study shows a decrease in suicides among young white people. And according to another study, between 2003 and 2017, over 1,800 black children died from committing suicide. And while a majority of these cases were among black boys, the suicide rate among black girls increased by 6.6%, twice the increase for boys. The study also found that almost 40% of these girls were between the ages of 12 and 14. The New York Times has reported that black children under the age of 13 die as a result of suicide at almost twice the rate of white children the same age. This is horrific, and it is happening. While experts can't pinpoint one reason behind the increase in suicides among black girls, they say ADHD, mental health issues, depression, anxiety, bullying, and you guessed it, racism and discrimination are among the top risk factors that is causing this tragedy.
A Utah mother says her 10-year-old daughter took her own life over the weekend after being bullied at school. She says she reported the bullying to the school, but claims nothing was done to protect her daughter.
Fox 13's Emily Tenser is live at Foxborough Elementary in North Salt Lake tonight with the mother's message to other parents and the district's response. Emily.
10-year-old Izzy Trishner was a student here at Foxborough Elementary. Her mom tells me they were getting excited because they were only 1 year away from middle school. Now, Izzy had autism spectrum disorder, and her mom said that made her an easy target for bullying.
Even though she came in my life for a decade, she was my guardian angel and is my guardian angel.
Brittany Tishner remembers her 10-year-old daughter as a beautiful young girl, a light that shined on everyone she met.
She was amazing. Even when people were mean to her, she would still help them.
Izzy Tishner was on the autism spectrum and had dyslexia. Her mother says other children recognized her differences and frequently bullied her.
She really didn't say what she wanted to be. But I knew I know she told me, "Mommy, I want to be more than this." And now I think I understand what she meant. More than this is more than her disability.
Well, an Alabama mother who says bullying led to her daughter's suicide blamed her school for not doing enough to protect the child. 9-year-old Mackenzie Adams took her own life last week. Her mother says the fourth grader was the target of constant racial taunts and name-calling. DeMarco Morgan is outside the school in Demopolis, Alabama. He spoke with Mackenzie's mother. DeMarco, this is such a sad story. Good morning.
Good morning. Jasmine Adams says she enrolled her daughter here hoping to get a fresh start because the little girl had been bullied at another school, but the taunting continued, so she alerted school officials. But according to police, school officials say they knew nothing about the bullying, only adding to the mother's heartbreak.
My baby, she was happy. She was joyful. She walked in the room, just her eyes just brightens up a room.
Jasmine Adams says after her daughter, Mackenzie, started fourth grade at U.S. Jones Elementary School, the 9-year-old started complaining about problems with her classmates.
What kind of problems?
There were children picking on her. I think a lot of it stemmed from she rode to and from school with a little white boy. It was like her best friend.
The mother says one boy would write Mackenzie notes in class.
I know one particular time he called her the N-word and the B word.
Jasmine says she voiced her concerns to school officials, who she says reassured her they would keep an eye on her daughter. But on the morning of December 3rd, Mackenzie took her own life in her family's home.
It's been nearly 4 months since Cornelia Reynolds discovered the unthinkable. Her 8-year-old son dead in his bedroom. Gabriel had hanged himself from his bunk bed.
He probably didn't want to say, "Mom, somebody bullying or picking on me," you know. He just didn't know how to tell me.
Reynolds spoke with our Cincinnati affiliate WLWT days after Gabriel's death and says she was never told her third grader was being bullied. But tonight, this video has been released showing an alleged assault in a school bathroom where Gabriel is knocked unconscious 2 days before he ended his life.
It felt like people were looking down on him. So we buried him this high, so when they had to come and see him, they always had to look up.
And experts aren't entirely sure why this deadly disparity is happening.
Mental health does play a big part. We need more support and awareness. We got to break the cycle.
Over the past decade, suicide attempts among Black children rose 92%. On January 19th of 2019, 10-year-old Seven Bridges was one of those children.
Seven was a blessing to everybody that met him. From the day he was born, he was always the star and didn't know it.
Tammy Charles is Seven's mother. She alleges that physical abuse and racist slurs at school harmed her son's mental state. So throughout 2019, she used Facebook to document her son's struggles.
I'm in school and my son has been called a and a and children.
Despite their visits to the school, Tammy and her husband Donnie claim Seven's bullying continued. They believe the bullying prompted Seven's suicide after Tammy found her son dead in his bedroom.
I started CPR on my baby. I did the proper compressions. I breathed into his mouth, and I had been drinking coffee. And as I began the compressions again, I could smell the coffee come back out of his lungs. I knew then that my son was dead.
As Tammy sat at the hospital, dealing with the aftermath of Seven's death, she wanted only one thing.
I just want to see him again. Before you take him, before you do an autopsy, before you embalm him, let me see my baby.
After I had my son, I learned pretty quickly that I would not have many children. My son was one of those babies. Those babies you couldn't take anywhere but grandma's house. Grandma knew how to console a crying baby, but no one else had the magic touch. He often cried for no apparent reason. He was dry and well fed, which I thought was all we needed to visit friends. But once we arrived, he just wouldn't stop crying. His crying led to a protruding navel. I was so worried about him getting a hernia and eventually needing surgery, which I heard was very common. So I spoke to my mother, who told me that her mother, my grandmother, told her to tape a silver dollar to the baby's navel, and it would keep it from becoming a hernia. I must say that this actually worked. Since the crying wouldn't stop, I needed something to prevent surgery. Historically, Black families have unconventional remedies to many ailments. Ask any Black family member how to cure a common cold or a skin rash. You would be given specific instructions on what herbs to mix or what to include in your hot tea to cure just about anything. In fact, there is a book of African American methods to cure just about anything dating back to slavery. Yes, these remedies go back to slavery. Home remedies were a form of medical treatment back then. And to this date, we use many of those remedies to cure non-threatening illnesses. But there is one thing you won't find in those books or in any recipe passed down through Black families. That is a cure for mental health related concerns. A silver dollar won't cure suicidal ideation. There isn't a mixture of herbs to prevent depression or hopelessness. Suicide is an epidemic in the Black community. Black youth suicide is at an all-time high, exceeding white children. In fact, in a recent study conducted by Jeffrey Bridge and colleagues out of Ohio State University, found that Black children, ages 5 to 12, suicide rates were double the rate of white children similar in age. Yes, I said ages 5 to 12. In fact, boys are more commonly found among this age group. A similar study found that LGBT youth of color were more likely to attempt suicide than straight youth. It has also been proven that girls make attempts at suicide twice as often as boys. Girls attempt suicide that requires medical attention more than boys as well. However, boys were found to be more successful on their first suicide attempt, while girls are more successful after multiple attempts. In addition, girls are 3 times more likely to self-harm than boys. In fact, black girls are more likely to self-harm than their white counterparts. Researchers contend that low-income communities have far more of a prevalence of self-harming youth. Our black and brown babies are dying because the pain they feel inside is so unbearable that they feel death is the only alternative. They are experiencing feelings of hopelessness and entrapment, and through their eyes, there is no way out. You won't find a remedy for this in any black family or community. How can we save our children? How can we change the black suicide narrative? It is my belief that the answer is in our history of unconventional methods. We can learn something from our cultural approach to healing. We need similar unconventional methods to reduce suicide rates among black children. Taking a more culturally focused approach would address this epidemic, build community, and demystify stigmas associated with mental health. A culturally appropriate approach would involve training black parents to be gatekeepers, the frontline intervention to suicidal ideation among black children. Throughout history, black families have dealt with issues and passed down the wisdom generation to generation. It is common knowledge that black families have been marginalized, which has caused a lack of confidence in many systematic approaches to issues within the family unit. Researchers have constantly affirmed, with empirical support, that African Americans on average do not attend counseling or traditional methods of addressing mental health. So the education of parents is a more culturally appropriate way to address black youth suicide. Equipping parents with all the tools given to gatekeepers, trained to recognize factors that lead to suicide and provide proper interventions, would give them the tools needed to end this epidemic. Proper training would include teaching parents to assess suicidal ideation, giving them the knowledge to seek appropriate interventions, and demystifying any stigma associated with traditional interventions. Focused parent trainings are needed to provide early intervention and treatment. It can also lead to the transferring of information throughout the family unit for generations to come. Parental education can save the lives of black children. Black families have a lack of trust in systematic traditional approaches to mental health. Researchers have contended that there is a shortage of black or African American therapists in the field, and that counselors of other races are not seen as culturally competent enough to address the challenges of black families. In addition, those that have received treatment have reported issues of microaggression and racism from their therapists. These barriers to treatment, along with existing access to treatment barriers as a result of insurance stipulations, permeate the lack of trust in systematic approaches to mental health within the black community. In addition, access to mental health barriers increase considerably for LGBT youth of color, who often experience homelessness, rejection, and identity-related challenges. Educating parents to recognize and respond to suicidal ideation in a culturally appropriate way is not only the answer to lowering youth suicide rates, but will also lead to building a sense of community. The empowerment of black parents to act early in addressing mental health challenges within their families would strengthen the black community. Education that is normally given to professional gatekeepers can provide black parents with clear understanding of the therapeutic process, which could lead to saving the lives of countless black children. I know what you're thinking. Intervention should be left up to the professionals and experts. However, this approach is just not working within the black community. The youth suicide rates are rapidly increasing, and black parents have been at the forefront of change within the black community. Black parents should be experts on the needs of their family members and gatekeeper education could empower them to take on the expert role and seek the proper interventions needed to save their loved one. This approach could put an end to suicide among youth in the Black community. Madison White said, Jamel Miles, Jasia Williams, Imani McCrae, all beautiful Black children under the age of 10 who died by suicide within the last year. It is time for us to take action. If you are a provider of suicide-focused gatekeeper training, this message is for you. Consider offering your specialized trainings to parents in urban communities. Utilize community centers, churches, and community-engaged nonprofit agencies as host sites for parent trainings. Providing your services in this manner will begin to equip parents with the tools they need to strengthen their families and local community. If you are a counselor, consider holding training in urban areas focused on explaining the treatment options for suicidal ideation and how you approach treatment. This type of training will begin to demystify treatment for suicidal ideation and equip parents with the knowledge that could save the lives of countless Black youth. If you are a parent, it is time for you to take action. Research local trainings in your area that focus on mental health and suicide. Ask the organizers if you can join the training or if they would be willing to offer a similar one in your local community. Now is the time for Black families to break through the stigma of mental illness. We need a remedy just like the silver dollar that prevented a hernia. Black parents are that silver dollar. It is time to take the lead role in lowering the rates of Black youth suicide. Thank you.
Thinking about the world, looking at the nation. Suicide, genocide, homicide. 3 words come to mind. Times are changing, yeah. No more rumors, there are wars going on. Twisted doctor, scientists making clones. Economy got some backs against the wall. People dying for no reason at all. People of God don't even read their Bibles. There's no faith, no trust in the word. But everybody seems to be quoting scripture. It's just another word they heard. Pastors leaving pulpits cause they're tired. It's all based on how we feel. Overheard 2 people speaking the other day. One said that God's not real, but I'm just one of them more people who's got a hold on.
Talk to him, Lou.
Shine, 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 shine on all of them. Shine on all of them. My homie said to shine your light, so shine on all of them. Climb. Death Street.